What up, guys? Welcome to EDMTUTS.com. Today we're going to learn how to make this gitter bass. Alright, so before we get started, I just want to go over a few key concepts because the most important part is getting a general grasp of the techniques and how to use them instead of just trying to memorize each specific parameter setting. So the first one is they use basic shapes a lot. So sine wave, square wave, saw wave, anything that's under the analog folder in Serum should work. Second one is they use FM a lot. So it's generally one basic wave shape FM'd by another basic wave shape. The third one is they utilize the sync warp mode a lot. So the second oscillator that's FMing the first generally will have the sync warp mode on it. And lastly, they use lots of high pass filters and EQ peaks and notches to bring out some vowel movements in the sound. Alright, so let's get started. So we're going to create a new MIDI track and initialize a new Serum patch. Now for this sound, all of the modulations are going to come from one macro knob. So we're going to turn the level down, grab macro 1, and drag it to level and put it all the way up. Then we're going to highlight the Serum instrument, hit Control G to group or Command G. Then we're going to show the macro controls, hit Map, open up Serum again, wiggle around the macro, and map it to macro 1. And we can rename this talk and then unmap. Next, what you're going to do is draw in some basic automation curves. All right. And we got some automation curves drawn in. Just a note, we could do the same thing with an LFO that's built inside Serum, but this is just a slightly different workflow, but it really doesn't make too much of a difference, so not a big deal. Alright, so first thing we're going to do is choose Analog MDC, and we're going to drag it up to about 72. Now again, I didn't just start making this sound and know that I wanted basic MDC. I just experimented around with a bunch of different basic shapes, and I decided on this one. Next, we're going to activate oscillator B, turn the level all the way down because we don't want to hear it, we just want it to FM the first one. We're going to select FM from B, drag it up to about 25-26%, and then modulate it up by about 22. So you can hear it starting to affect the sound. We're going to pitch it up by 2 octaves. And that starts to make it sound a little more metallic. Next, what we're going to do is we're going to turn the phase random all the way down. So if you notice, every time I hit a note, sometimes it will sound just very slightly different than the note before it, and that's because when you have phase random on, every time you hit a note, it will start at a different point on the waveform. So what we want to do is turn it down, so that way every time a note plays, it will always start right in the middle. Alright, next what we're going to do is we're going to choose Analog J and O for oscillator B. And we're going to choose Sync as the warp mode. And we're going to turn it up to about 5.9. Now again, when I was making this sound, I didn't just know that I wanted the sync at 5.9. I knew I wanted sync, but I didn't know exactly where, so I just messed around with a bunch of different settings. And at many points during the process of making the sound, I had it at a different setting. So experiment around, try a bunch of different settings, and eventually you'll get something that sounds good to you. It's also very touchy, so if I move it up or down even a little bit, it can really change the sound. But we're going to stick with 5.9. Next, what we're going to do is we're going to turn the wavetable position to 6. And that's about it for the wavetable and warping part. Alright, next we're going to try to make it sound a little more unique and add some vowel movement to the sound with filters and EQs. So we're going to activate the filter, go down to multi HP12, which stands for high pass peak 12. So it's a high pass and a peak filter. We're going to put macro 1 on the cutoff, and it's going to go from all the way down to about 55. And right now it's just cutting out some low end until we add some resonance. And we're going to modulate the resonance again a little bit. So this way, as it reaches the peak of the automation, it has a lot of resonance. And as it goes back down and starts going back into the lower frequencies, the resonance is taken away. So that way there's not a big peak on some of the sub frequencies, which would sound kind of weird. And then we're going to do another automation with the drive. We're going to bring it up and then modulate it down. And what we're doing here is at the beginning, there will be a lot of drive, so it will be distorted. And then as it goes up, there will be less drive. So that way, there's a little more attack to the beginning of the sound, and it's a little more snappy, a little more poppy. And then we're going to take a peak, bring it to about 70–72%, drag macro 1, and drag it down about -9. So as you can hear, it's adding some vowel characteristics to the sound. Next, we're going to take an EQ. Make sure you set the types to peak. We're going to drag the gain up on the left peak to about 10 and about 12–15 on the second peak. We're going to drag the resonance down on the second peak. Next, we're going to take macro 1 and we're going to modulate the first peak by about 10 or 11, and we're going to drag it up to about 350 hertz. And then we're going to take the second peak, drag it to about 1400 hertz, somewhere around there. And then we're going to modulate it down just by a tiny bit. So it sounds kind of weird right now, but when we add on distortion and some compression after it, then it will make it sound better. And lastly, what we're going to do is we're going to add a phaser. Turn the rate down. Turn the depth up a little bit. Turn the frequency to about 2600. Feedback to about half, and we're going to modulate the mix. So what a phaser does is it's basically a filter that adds a bunch of peaks and notches to the sound, and we're just making those peaks and notches more prominent around 2600, so that will just boost some frequencies and take some out in that range, which will make it sound a little more unique and add a little more vowel to the sound. Alright, next we're just going to add some effects to beefing up the sound a little bit. We're going to activate a distortion, put it before everything. Tube will be fine. You're going to put the drive up a little bit, and we're going to modulate the mix. Next, we're going to add a hyper dimension. And we're going to turn the mix down a little bit, so we're only getting a little bit of detune. Going to turn the size down and the mix up a little bit. So this is kind of just adding some delay and some detune to the sound, which will make it sound a little wider. And then lastly, for the serum effects, we're going to add a compressor. Make sure you click multiband. We're going to turn the threshold down a little bit. We're going to turn the ratio down a little bit to about 2 to 1. So this way it won't be compressing as hard. It will just be some soft compression. And we're going to turn the gain up a little bit. And next what we're going to do is we're going to mess with these bands. So the way these bands work is that all the bands on the left that are yellow are set to expansion. So expansion works by making sounds that hit a certain threshold louder, and then compression works by making sounds that hit a certain threshold quieter. So we want to make the high band a little bit louder, so we're going to expand it. And we want the mid band to be not too compressed, and the low band to be the most compressed because we're going to be adding in our own sub anyways. Okay, now we're going to add a multi-band compressor. So hit Control F to search, type in multi-band dynamics. And what we're going to do here is just try to get the individual bands to sound well together. Generally what I do when I'm doing multi-band compression on a sound is I kind of just drag each band up and down and play around with the compression settings and keep messing around until it starts sounding good to me. So in this case, the high end sounded a little bit too harsh. So I'm compressing the high frequencies a little bit more than the mid frequencies. And I'm trying to just level out all the bands a little bit. Next, we're going to add a saturator. And we're going to choose soft sine. The way these wave shapes work is the steeper the curve, the more distortion you're adding to the sound. But we're going to stick with soft sine and drag the drive up to about 7 or 8. Alright, so that's about it. Hopefully you learned something. Remember to focus more on the general techniques instead of the exact parameter settings. If you benefited from this tutorial and you enjoyed it, then please subscribe and share. It will help me to keep making good tutorials. And as always, the presets will be in the description and the live set will be up for free download. You can check that link in the description as well. Alright, thank you.